They don't have that much. For officer, I think anyway.
We're good?
Oh, so you were wrong.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. We're calling the special city council meeting and public hearing, August 31st, 2022, City of Wood Creek to order. It is 2 o'clock. And I ask everyone to rise for a moment of silence and stay on the beat for the pledge. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. That Reverend Shield to the invitation. That's my chance. Please call the roll, please.
Mayor Jim Fresco.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Aurora LaFleur. Councilmember Chris Brummer.
Here.
Councilmember Deborah Hines.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Pisarba.
Here.
And Councilmember Foley.
Here. We have a quorum. I will open with public comments. I do have a written public comment, but we have some folks in person. We'll hit those first. Judy Brizadine.
Thank you. The city of Wood Creek, being a type A general law city without a charter, works under the governance and the guidelines of the Texas Government Code and the state constitution. That being said, the governing body directs the office of city manager and under the Attorney General's dual office holding laws number 29 regarding self-employment, and I quote, a member of a local governing body may not simultaneously serve as an employee of his or her entity. The example given, the city council did not appoint one of its current members to also serve as the city manager. Whereas Mayor Rasco and council member Hines began representing him as acting city manager to the city vendors back as late as July the 1st, he has violated the self-employment rule. Therefore, if this council votes on his appointment to this office, and the mayor accepts that position, we would ask it be necessary for him to resign as mayor. Furthermore, I request that Councilmember Hines recuse herself from voting on certain governing actions under the same dual position laws that she has filed an application for the city manager's position. I implore the city attorney to advise this governing body of the legal ramifications of its actions on item 17.
Frank Wood.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I don't have any one particular item to address as our other citizen did. I came here from a bond issue discussion. And quite frankly, unless I'm not reading right, I don't see any agenda item for that. Is there? Is the bond issue going to be discussed?
It already has been.
I'm sorry?
It already has been discussed.
Well, it was my understanding from the article in the newspaper, that was the purpose of this meeting.
No.
It would be discussed. Well, I'm behind the curve then. Okay. May I speak to that issue briefly? I was Public Works Director here in April '05, until just a few months ago, when I had to resign from the position to be a better caretaker for my wife, who we're now looking into moving into hospice care. I think anybody here is aware of my opinion on how the roads need to be taken care of, and that was to rebuild them, as we did on Brook Hollow. I also support concrete rather than asphalt, because it has a longer lifespan and a lower maintenance requirement to construct it properly. Okay? Well, I don't know what is being looked at. I have no answer to that. I thought that's what would come up at this meeting. It appears I'm behind the curve. But I'll say, be aware, I'm support of properly reconstructing all the roads. It desperately needs to be done. We spend thousands of dollars a year, 80,000 to start with, up to like almost 200,000 to start with, to do nothing but repair work on a road that was not only held up for another year. It was like throwing money down a black hole. So I support the bond issue, but I have no idea what the intent of construction or repair. And I'll get together with somebody at another time to get an answer to that. Okay? I thank you very much for this opportunity.
All right, Big Alfred.
First of all, I'd just like to thank all of you for all the many, many, many hours that you put in helping to run this city and keep us on the straight and narrow. About the budget, I have gone through it pretty carefully, and what was filed is incomplete. There is no provision for any salaries, meaning that we could have no employees after the 1st of October. There are several other sections that there is no information at all supplied. This is totally incomplete. I don't think that there's any way that this can be voted on today or in the immediate future. I think it needs a whole lot of work. All of the yellow is information that needs to be included. I'd be happy to discuss this with any of you anytime.
Kim?
Sure, of course. Thank you.
William Shield?
Thank you. I'm speaking to item 17 on the agenda regarding the hiring of the mayor as city manager. And I'd like to speak from the angle of the aspect of best practices rather than law. I've heard Ms. Brizendine speak already to the law about that. But there is a process generally used for hiring someone like a city manager who is the CEO of the operation and is reports to the board. You all are the board of directors, the board of trustees, whatever. It's your job to determine policy. It's the job of a city manager, in this case, to carry out that policy. And the hiring of a city manager follows something like having general discussions with the board and then with consultation with the voters, maybe with professional consultants, TML, for example. You may have done that, I'm not aware of that. And then after a hiring notice is drafted and distributed to professional organizations, the process moves to a multi-story interview process. That includes a review of applications, on-site interviews of qualified candidates, plural, and ends finally with a vote taken by council. And I have not seen any documentation leading up to today that suggests that any of those steps have been carried out. So all of a sudden, we're going to hire our president of our board to be the CEO of the operation. I've been in that kind of a situation once professionally by necessity. I got out of it just as fast as I could, as soon as I could go through those steps and find an appropriate person, a trained, experienced person to do that particular job. So I urge that upon you all and urge you not to make the decision that's implied in agenda item number 17. Thank you.
All right, we do have one written comment. This is from our city secretary, Suzanne McKenzie. She writes, "Good afternoon, council members, mayor, and citizens. I am writing a quick email to address concern on the agenda for today. Item number 12, creation of a City of Wood Creek social media page. The city does not need a social media page. The citizens of Wood Creek want to find out what official and final actions the city has taken. There is an option for them on the city website under the community resources page to sign up to receive text and email notifications. They may not all know about these options, which is why I sent in the comment. If this item passes, then can it please be specified what hours the city staff will be required to work in addition to the 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. office hours and meetings? If this item passes, a website monitoring company should be hired to capture the public comments on the social media page. D, if there is also a concern that comments on social media pages could become heated and they could potentially roll over into business operating hours and become a safety issue for city staff. Thank you for your time." Ends the public comments. And getting to the regular agenda, I will say that we'd already decided to strike item number 17 anyway, because it came to our attention that there were issues with it. The reason it was on the agenda is because we were having trouble with a vendor and working with me because I was not staff. So we said, okay, well, I'll just, with the departure of Mr. Lewis, I've been doing the work of the city manager, so I'm acting city manager. There's never any conversation about employment or enumeration or anything like that. So we just want to make that clear. It is off the agenda. We're not going to hit 17. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from the special city council meeting of August 2nd, 2022. Have a motion on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda of the minutes. Item number 1.
Seconded by Councilmember Brummer. Vote on the consent agenda.
Councilmember Brummer.
Aye.
Councilmember Hines. Aye. Councilmember Flatarga.
Aye.
And Councilmember Paul.
All right. Thank you. Item number 2 is a particular world. For me, I'm going to turn this over to you, Councilmember Paul.
Yes. Rick, I want to recognize you in a minute, but before we do, I just want to talk about this award a little bit and then introduce you to those that don't know you already, I suppose. This is the inaugural Spirit of Wood Creek Award. And we thought there ought to be something we could use to recognize people that go above and beyond, keeping the spirit of Wood Creek and demonstrating what it means to be a good neighbor, to be, a good citizen, and keep Wood Creek what it is. And when we had conversations about it, several names came up, and one of the names that came up a lot was Rick Maldonado. We all know that Rick, walks through the neighborhood and he works hard to keep the neighborhood nice and beautiful, and he's always a good friend when you're out walking around and you see Rick, you get a chance to talk to him and say hello and have some jokes. So Rick, you do represent the spirit of Wood Creek, and I am proud to present this inaugural award for your work and for your friendship and for reflecting the spirit of Wood Creek. And you're the very first one to get this, sir. So congratulations. We have one of these for you, so all your neighbors know.
We'll take care of that.
Yeah. And, Rick, do you mind? My wife wanted me to get a picture of you, so if someone takes a picture of us, do you have
Yeah.
a camera? Okay.
You got a couple of them.
Oh, yeah.
You want my good side or my?
No, you're both in front.
Move your hand. Please.
Thank you, Rex.
Let it go, bud.
Well,
All right, that's fine. I'm blaming you. Take it with you.
See you guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And remember, you see me walking around the dollar once in a while. Congratulations.
You can pick up dollar bills with that little grabber. All right, the next item on the agenda, public hearing on the proposed tax rate for the 22-23 tax year. Calling this public hearing into order at 2:16. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to speak to the tax rate has been established? So calling us out of public session at 2:16. Discussion and take a final vote on the proposed 22-23 tax rate. I will call for a vote. There was some confusion in getting, there's a kind of dance you have to do in timing between filing for the tax rate and filing for the budget. The budget is coming in our next meeting. And in doing this dance, we missed an opportunity to put the ads in the paper at the same time so that we could do the budget and the tax rate at the same time, which threw us off. So we were too late to cancel this public hearing and get a budget hearing in at the same time. So what we worked with the city secretary and talked it through and said the best way to manage this right now is to call for the vote on the tax rate, and if the members of the council will abstain, it will go back, onto the shelf. We'll go back and then call the public hearing, and then everything will be on the right time. So,
Mayor,
yes.
I move we adopt the no new revenue rate as 0.1817 of our proposed 2022-2023 tax rate.
You're moving for the no new revenue.
Correct, for as our new proposed rate.
Okay. Do we vote on that, or do we go ahead and abstain, so we take that up next time?
This is the motion.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, so we have a motion seconded by Councilmember Hines.
So,
Move us to the no new revenue rate.
so the difference between the no new revenue rate and the most recent proposal is 0.0022, which equals $6,897 above for the city's tax base. Since we're going out, we're setting in the next following agendas, we're setting the new public hearings and new announcements to the paper. I thought this would be a good opportunity to announce. So we can do it on the final. Subjects. Thank you.
Okay, so did you withdraw that?
I did.
Okay.
So we're back to discussion and take a final vote on the proposed tax rate, which was 0.183. $100 valuation. That motion.
I move that we call the vote.
What are you doing over there, man? What's wrong? Okay.
I'd like to make a statement about this motion. If it's permitted, if not, I'll keep my mouth shut.
I'm listening.
If there is any action taken on this item at this meeting, then you must, within 7 days, pass this rate. Then it falls before the budget is approved.
We discussed it, and there is a 7 day, that's the 7 days that we're working on, and we're not having to hold yet another special meeting. The decision was that if we took a vote on this and all council members abstain, then we will call the public hearing at our special meeting on September 14th, where we would set the final rate and set the final budget at the same time.
You might.
Okay, so I wanted to explain this a little bit better. So the public notice for the budget didn't get into the paper with the public hearing for the tax note. So that put us out of order, right? You're supposed to pass the budget first, and then you do the tax rate. By law, it says you need to do it in that order. When you have a public hearing on the tax rate, you have to take a vote within 7 days of having the hearing. So by having the vote today, we are fulfilling that obligation, and it is not by abstaining, we are asking that council abstains. It essentially falls flat, and there is no tax rate being passed today. So it does not violate the budget needing to be first, followed by tax rate. Then we're going to have the discussion of setting a second public hearing. Notices have been filed properly this time. The Hayes County Assessor has produced it as they should. The budget one is making it in. And so we're going to hopefully all collectively decide to hold the public hearing that we're planning on September 14th. And that will follow the proper order. When I discussed planning, it was Mayor Roscoe and our city secretary and myself that worked on this the other day and read the law documents. Suzanne helped us. She interpreted it as well. So we've had 3 people reading and interpreting this. And if the lawyer would also like to chime in, but essentially it does not say no action or action. It's about the vote being taken. And the requirement is that a vote occurs during the 7 days after the public hearing. And that's what we are doing today. And I would be happy to send anybody that needs the document to reference via email. You can read it yourselves. It's also posted on TML. It's very easy to access. A little bit hard to understand, but hosted. Did all that right? Hosting.
Okay, well.
I didn't post anything. Yeah, our staff handles that. And so, yeah.
So, nothing to add on that part. But if you want to allow public comments during this time, you guys have the right to. If the council has a point to make within this agenda items germane to those public comments, that's certainly not however you see. But I have nothing to add to what.
So going forward, I'd like to move forward on that vote.
Councilmember Kisarba?
Aye.
So
I'm sorry.
are you voting on the tax rate? Or you are voting on the tax rate? Or
Okay, could you repeat the motion?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Okay, the motion is to call the vote on the tax rate of 0.1839.
Call the vote.
Yeah, so you're voting on that tax rate.
And we talked about abstaining so that we can move it forward.
Councilmember Drummer,
Abstain.
Councilmember Polly
Abstain.
and Councilmember Hines.
Abstain.
So number 5 is discussion and take appropriate action on setting a public hearing on proposed 22-23 tax rate for September 14th at 2 p.m. here at City Hall. Entertain that motion.
I move that we hold the public hearing on the proposed tax rate for 2022 to 2024, 14th at 2 p.m. to occur here at City Hall.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pulley. Any discussion?
Mayor, may I just want to remind everyone that we have a new staff member. Lacking in a staff member. We have a volunteer mayor helping run city business and move things along, and a volunteer council person stepping in to assist as well. We are taking applications for the city manager position, but in the wake of the resignation of city manager Lewis, it left a void, and I want to ask for grace as we move through this process, since we have new staff learning and we have volunteers filling in positions of paid officials and spending countless hours working to keep the city running.
Councilmember Polly,
We're setting for September 14, I vote aye.
Councilmember Catarpo.
Aye.
Councilmember Hines
Aye.
and Councilmember Graham.
All right, that is unanimous. Next item on the agenda is to set the date and time for the final vote on the proposed tax rate.
September 14. Can I move to set that item for September 14, 2002, at 2 p.m. in City Hall?
I second.
Motion by Councilmember Pulley, seconded by Councilmember Brummer. Any discussion? Call the roll whenever you're ready.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Polly,
Aye.
Councilmember Bremer,
Aye.
Councilmember Catarpo.
Aye.
It is unanimous. Item number 7, discussion and take possible action to set a public hearing on the City of Wood Creek proposed budget for September 14th.
I move that we set the public hearing for the Wood Creek City budget for 2022 to 2023 on the same date of September 14th to at 2 p.m. to 32.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Catarpa.
Aye.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Councilmember Bremer.
Aye.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Catarpo,
Aye.
and Councilmember Polly.
Aye.
All right, and then the final related motion to this is discussion and take possible action on setting the date and time for final vote on the 2022-23 budget.
I move that we hold the final vote on the 2022-2023 proposed budget on the same day as the public hearing of September 14th here at City Hall.
Second.
And just for purpose of discussion, just for purpose of discussion, was offered, I don't know where the budget figures that you've shared, and I mean, every budget that we've shared so far has all of the information on salaries and everything that we share. Now, there may have been some glitch on the website, but I would be happy to share those with you after the meeting or whenever we can.
There are 3 instances on the website of the budget that was, the proposed budget dated August 23rd, and the items that are in there are not.
I've been looking at packets and not website.
I understand.
So I can get that information for you. Believe me, I've been going through the budget items one by one for weeks now. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, if I may make what I believe is a proper point of order. We're all hearing the votes, okay, but we're not hearing a final closure to the vote. We're not hearing that the vote on agenda item such and such passed or failed, and the count of the vote, like the yeas and the nays. I think that should be done for each item that there is a vote on.
Okay. You know, I will generally say that it passed unanimously. I may not remember to do it on every one of them, but it's all in the record, it's on video.
Well,
It's not something that is,
okay,
but thank you very much for that suggestion, I'll keep it in mind. All right, item number 9.
Did you get a second?
Do we have to vote on it?
I think I second.
You did.
I'm so excited to move forward. Okay, then let's vote on number 8.
Councilmember Foley,
Aye.
Councilmember Catarba,
Aye.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Brummer.
All right, that passed unanimously with 4 ayes and no nays.
Yeah. I just looked at the website, and it looks like there's pages.
Whole pages of the.
Yeah, which they're there when we passed it and discussed it and voted on it. And so that version is in that previous packet. So however this was uploaded in the website, it looks like they're, and I don't have them side by side yet to confirm, but it does look like we might be missing whole pages out of the books.
Oh,
Not necessarily in the packet, but this other link that they're referring to. So they're there. It's, they've been handled. It's just the pages aren't loaded on the website. So we
well,
need to fix that.
yeah, we'll look at it. Thank you. All right, item number 9. This is to discuss and take appropriate action on ordinance calling and ordering the general election to elect 3 at-large council member positions for 2-year terms, and the election be held on November 8th, 2022. Entertain a motion.
I move that we, I move that we approve the ordinance calling and ordering the general election for the purpose of electing 3 at-large council member positions for 2-year terms to be held on November 8th, 2022.
Second.
Councilmember Pulisic. With the ordinance, I will call the roll.
Councilmember Brummer,
Aye.
Councilmember Catarba,
Aye.
Councilmember Foley,
Aye.
Councilmember Hines.
Passes unanimously, 4 ayes. Item number 10, discussion and take appropriate action on Councilmember Carter's recommendation for P and Z.
I recommend that Tamara Robertson be appointed to P and Z, and I think the appointment would be as a regular appointment.
I second.
Seconded by Councilmember Brummer, motion by Councilmember Tarba. Any discussion on the application? I know they're gonna miss you, Councilmember Tarba, but you picked the final replacement. Take the vote on this.
Councilmember Foley,
Aye.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Catarba,
Aye.
and Councilmember Brummer.
And the motion passes unanimously. Ms. Robinson will be a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Discuss and take appropriate action, this is item number 11, on the council liaison policy document, and consider publishing the document on the city website. That's more nice.
I move that we approve the council liaison policy document and publish it on the website for public reference.
I second.
Seconded by Councilmember Brummer. And I might add that, you know, we have assigned these positions, you know, months ago, and it's been working very well. And we've worked on policies and just get those tweaked and on the books. So I think that it's pretty straightforward, but I think there are other discussion.
I was just gonna
Go ahead.
introduce that, that's right. So this document is something I wrote with the assistance of the mayor to outline the liaison role and responsibility and to kind of highlight the areas of focus. The main thing that is important to remember is that all of our city boards, panels, committees, and commissions shall function autonomously. So the liaison is not a member, but they are there to facilitate and assist in any way that they can or are welcome to by the head of the respective board. This document was reviewed by our city secretary, who has extensive background in HR, and she did make edits to it. And that should be the copy that you have in your packet.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason why we want this posted on the website is so that the public can review it at any time they'd like, and that by making it a policy, it sort of sets that clear guideline in place and gives a reference point for it, so that any future council members also have that to review, and we don't have to do this meeting over and over again. We can just put it in their binder and then they're good to go.
Councilmember Foley?
I want to say I like that. I like the guidelines. I particularly like the autonomous function. We have been kind of memorialized here. I've been working with the tree board, and I like the fact that we're hearing from them, and it's not us telling them what to tell us. And so I like the guidelines. I think it's a good idea to put them in writing and then to put them up on the website. So I support that.
Any further discussion? All right, we can take a vote on the liaison policy document.
Councilmember Hines.
Aye.
Councilmember Foley.
Aye.
Councilmember Brummer. Councilmember Matarva.
Aye.
4 ayes, unanimous vote. Move on to council, or to item number 12, on the creation of an official City of Wood Creek social media account on Facebook and Nextdoor. Councilmember Hines?
I move that the City of Wood Creek create an official City of Wood Creek social media account on Facebook and Nextdoor.
I second.
Seconded by Councilmember Brummer.
Mayor, may I?
Please.
So in my suggestion of this item, I mean, anyone who's been following me on social media for the last 2 years has seen me advocating for it for a while. The big freeze that occurred really highlighted how important social media is for a city, because there was a lot of information being disseminated via social media to our citizens. Our citizens were getting together there and talking to each other. There was services being provided, like the distribution of water and all of these things. And yes, we also have email and we have text messaging. I myself am less reliant on those things. I check my email maybe twice a day. I check social media more. Maybe that's just my age group, but that is the reality. Social media is becoming our community forum. It's replacing that town square where people used to gather, essentially. If you search most cities, they almost all have social media accounts. I provided 2 examples just around us. The vision for this, or why I personally believe this is so important, is because depending on elected officials to disseminate information from personal social media accounts is problematic. And also it's dependent on those elected officials being willing to do that. So if, for example, Mayor Pro Tem Aurora Lebrun is not running for election again. So we will lose her and her influence on social media. And with that, there will be a void of public information being distributed. And so essentially the goal of having a staff member posting on this is to a couple things. One is so that you can use it to sway in elections, right? So if you're posting information that you're getting directly from the source before the city has posted it, that's also problematic. The other thing that's really important is that then there would be a consistent message board for citizens that's not dependent on elected officials who cycle in and out of office. The other benefit to an official page is that the communication would be streamlined, meaning if it's coming from staff, it would be devoid of opinion. It would be devoid of, like, say, people don't like me, they don't read my post, I mean, they even blocked me, so they miss out on information from me if I'm the only person posting it, right? But an official city page is unlikely to be controversial in any way. It's facts. It's important information getting out there. And I would recommend that it basically just be a copy of the city email that goes out, posted there for reference. In the event of an emergency, it would be the emergency messages that are going out. It gives you quicker access to people because the other beauty of social media is that you get notifications. I have mine turned off, but a lot of people have theirs turned on. So, for example, my business page or whatever, it pings me when somebody has made a comment. So that's the benefit of social media. I think it's time Wood Creek has joined the rest of the cities around us. In your packet, you can see Blanco, Wimberley, they have them. So
I just did a quick check myself. Wimberley, Blanca, Dripping Springs, Kyle, Buda, San Marcos, Johnson City, Bernie. The only ones I came up with that I couldn't find was Marble Falls. They have a Visit Marble Falls site in Bull Verde. So, I mean, it's like, I don't know what we know that they don't know. I think it's not.
And I just wanted to add one more comment. So, to address this concept of issues of public comments, you can turn off public comments. They can be not allowed on a page, and there's nothing illegal about that. When we were sitting in the Vortex social media presentation, he talked about cases where people did get in legal trouble, or just like, there's a lawsuit filed, the repercussions, this and that, right? But just a lawsuit, we don't want to go there. That's a waste of money. But so the thing that in those cases hurt a university or a city was when they had public comments turned on and then turned off. So if you just start off with them turning off and it's just a page that's posting resources and not a forum for discussion, that would eliminate that concern and kind of alleviate. And then the last thing I wanted to address is this concept of somebody needing to go in there and take screenshots. Again, that removes that issue. Also, social media holds records. Specifically, Facebook doesn't delete anything. Nextdoor, you can request those records as well. So they already do that capturing system. There is no issue on that front. You don't have to hire a third
Oh,
How would this action affect or impact, right now, we post statements about city council meetings in Nextdoor and with the approval of the mayor. Is this related in any way?
we don't put,
Pardon?
we have no city presence on Nextdoor or Facebook.
That's chosen by an individual on their own.
Well, but I'm saying though that, so what's the status of what we're doing with Nextdoor? Maybe you can explain that.
Well, in theory, if this is approved, basic communication would then flow from an official City of Wood Creek page rather than an elected official using their personal account to disseminate public information, which is what happens now. There's nothing to stop Councilmember Bremer from reposting the recap if he wanted, or sharing it in other locations. There's nothing to stop me from posting a discussion on an agenda item. We still have those rights, but what it would do is essentially create a unified communication where residents could go and they could trust. Because, there's supporters behind all of us, and then there are people who don't support us. So there can be a lack of trust, especially in emergency situations, which is why I find this so important. Because in like a freeze, or if we had, a fire, or, God forbid, any of the things that we always discuss and worry about, it would serve us well to have one point of communication, because what we saw in the freeze is 5 different posts. Wait, where's the water? Is it still open? Oh, I don't know. I can't find that thread. And you can still see it on all of the forums. They're consistent. And
Just a quick follow-up, but on the current use of posts on Nextdoor, these statements are approved by the mayor. What does that mean?
If I may,
Yeah.
if I may, I'm going to explain what he's referring to.
okay.
So the city emails, what I do is I go up and we all get the city emails, those who have subscribed to the city emails. I take and copy and paste the city email onto Nextdoor and onto a Wood Creek group on Facebook. I do it verbatim, and all I'm doing is just for those who aren't signed up for city emails, they get the information as well.
But it's not officially from the city, it's from.
The recap is officially, what the word you're saying is approved by the mayor. The recap itself is approved by the mayor. And I'm just, if you go to the city email, I'm just literally copying and pasting, putting it in Nextdoor, and then putting it on Which, so this, if I may continue my sentence, what this does, it allows me time to do other things. So that I'm not doing that.
Well, final word, excuse me, I was at a meeting with Texas Municipal League a couple of weeks ago. This issue came up, because there's a lot of interest in social media and city operations. And, there was an expert there who was lecturing us on these kind of things, and her basic advice was, you're safest when you go on social media of any kind and repeat things that are official, like minutes and things like that. But these posts on the next door, that's not minutes, the ones that they're referring to.
No, I'm
But
personally
it's
responsible.
before the minutes have been approved in December.
I'm personally responsible for those. I accept liability of them. I also have others review them before they're posted, and I attempt to stay to that.
I'm not saying that they're not the fact, but the final piece of advice that we got at this meeting was check with city attorney on how we should handle this. Whether things should be official before they're posted as appearing to be official.
Yes, again, that's a good point, Joe. What we're trying to do is get out of individual council members having to, cut and paste something and put it on next door. Instead, it comes from an official source, namely the city. And I think that's a good idea, that we get a consistent message. We're in line with all the other little towns around us. Basically publish facts, information, discussion about emergencies, things like that. And I think it's important that the idea of cutting off comments, I think, is important, because otherwise you're going to get this long thread of people just murdering, the item, and they just put information out there. So I think that's a good idea. The only issue I have is that we are operating with a short staff right now. We are actively looking for a new manager. We're going to be starting interviews pretty soon. I think we have to implement this, but the issue is with our staff right now, do they have time to do this? I would be comfortable implementing it, or voting yes for it, but implementing it when we get a new city manager.
Yeah.
Stepping it up.
Yeah, stepping it up. How do you feel about that?
I feel that an amendment should be made that the public comments are turned off. The things that have been posted about the staff on Facebook and on next door have not been kind, have not even been true.
Yeah.
So I think to have to address it on the weekends and, and another thing is during the emergency, I had no power at my house and there was no power at City Hall. So there would have been no way to post it on the Facebook for me. Maybe Suzanne had power, but I did not.
Yeah, we were charging my phone in my car. I know the mayor was also at the time was charging her phone in her car, and there was communication going out.
Right.
Well, I would ask that we amend the motion to, number one, make sure that we turn comments off, and number two, we implement it when we get the new city manager. You accept that?
Yeah, the motion to amend.
So the amendment, okay.
Yeah.
Vote on the amendment. No, not a vote on the amendment, a second on the amendment.
Every second is.
Okay, I think you both moved.
I move to second.
We're very moved.
Oh, you moved. All right, yeah, I'm okay with getting a couple of comments, keep it brief.
Can I ask for a recess, like 2 minutes?
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, it's
Just
not on the
just a
record.
quick
I
line.
understand.
No, I'm, just a second. Just to remind the council that Mayor Pro Tem Aurora LaRon worked on this project and,
Yeah, we have.
and, okay, you have something, well,
Yeah.
Aurora worked on the project. She had recommended, and she certainly was in, acceptance and accord, and she was very interested in going forward. She studied very hard on this subject. Vicki Alford also was going to be working with her. I know Mayor Fresco worked with Aurora. And the idea at that time, there were recommendations made. The vote was taken, no, to proceed, but there were recommendations made at that time to consider going forward with a study on the costs of what it would cost, what the cost would be for the city, with the issues that the lawyers all brought up in all of our various seminars and worrisome issues, that retention requirements for open records and other issues that needed to be addressed. She just simply urged that the council at the time go forward with creating a policy, which was what Nikki was going to be working with her on at the time. Some policy, some directions, and some cost analysis, and then come back. So maybe amendments included some of that. That would certainly be, I think, what she would have spoken to today. If she had
Right,
been
and she
able to
did.
hear.
She did.
Are you going to bring up her
Yeah,
comments?
she was not able to attend,
Right.
is ill. She shared her social media, discussion document with some highlights on it.
Okay.
That's, certainly
Well, I
being
think
taken into
that
account. We understand that
You brought that to the attention of the other council members.
everybody's got a copy.
Right.
She
So do you
didn't,
mind
she didn't
reading-
realize she was going to be ill, so it didn't make it in the
But do you mind reading some of that, or her comments in there into the record then before you vote, in order to have all the council members understand what Aurora has
she
studied and done?
She approves this. She approves of this, but she does say that, we need to, the retention policies and everything have to be in place. That's part of, ramping it up correctly.
Right, so do you mind perhaps having council members address that?
That would be up to them.
I'm saying, do you mind having them
If
vote
they'd like to make those
what you think?
recommendations, we have
Mayor,
a motion and then this is on the floor.
I think we need, or
oh, yeah. Nothing can be official.
Let me go ahead and say one thing.
Sure, go ahead.
I think that Wood Creek City should have a social media presence in the city. I would caution Facebook because you're gonna open it up to everybody and their dog. And that shouldn't be. Wood Creek should be Wood Creek. And if you're outside of Wood Creek, you should have no business, none. Not in the way we run our city.
I think the golf course probably just.
Mr. Mayor,
If I can play golf this in the city.
I think Mr. Upton made a good point. We want to hear from people's dogs. That's fine.
I should have brought it.
Okay, we have a, come back to second, we have a motion and a second on the amendment.
If you're right, I'd like to address some concerns about it being open. So again, it's an informational page, and if you have comments turned off, anyone can access our website. Anyone can be aware. We actually even have somebody here right now who doesn't live in Wood Creek in this room with us at this meeting. So I think it's okay. We live in a valley together. I think it's okay people see our information, and especially when we're talking about our ETJ, right? Those people, while not residents in our city limits, in my personal opinion, have a right to engage with us in the same manner that anyone could come here and give a public comment. You don't have to live here to give public comments. So with that in mind, the comments being turned off is essential. We've addressed that. We've amended and discussed. We have not held a vote on it being implemented after we have a third employee. As far as cost to staff, again, if this is informational and they're not generating new posts, it's literally one more click. So while there are costs and time consumption, it is not a significant, they're not regenerating new information for these posts. The thing about this document is that other cities are doing this. We're not inventing the wheel. I think we are addressing most of the legal concerns by not having comments. I would like to amend and include the concept of a social media policy following this. That is a good idea, and thankful Mayor Whitehead reminded us of that.
I second.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, we're not doing social media policy today.
No, but a social media policy would follow as the amendment that I just made.
That needs to be, we still have a, and proposed amendment.
Yeah. So we need to hold votes on both before we keep going.
What's the second amendment?
So the first amendment is to turn public comments
Well,
off
maybe,
and
Maureen,
after
do you
the
have
city
this?
manager.
Okay, yeah, so the first amendment is the public comments are off and implement with the new after the new city manager is hired. So the second amendment is the social media policy follow.
Okay, well, that, I was talking about the other amendment. I didn't consider the second amendment. I would like to knock that other amendment
Yeah.
first. So. So, no, we have a motion to amend on the floor in a second on the, wait until, we're fully staffed. And, I mean, let's take that amendment into consideration first.
It goes the other way.
So we take the last amendment and that.
See, I wasn't ready to accept this. Okay, all right.
Would you like me to withdraw?
Go ahead, we'll do it. We'll do it.
Okay, so Chris,
We're voting on the second amendment.
who's your second? Okay, so this is on the second amendment for the social media policy.
Okay, so the amendment we're voting on is to work on that social media policy, which by the way is already somewhat of the way. I mean, there was work done on the policy. It's just a matter of taking a look at it and doing that stuff.
Okay.
We can take a vote on that amendment,
Councilmember Katarna?
Which one are we voting on?
the policy.
That we're gonna have a policy to follow.
Aye.
Okay. Councilmember Brummer?
Aye.
Councilmember Hines?
Aye.
And Councilmember Schultz?
All right. All right.
Okay, so now, we have a vote on
That
the first
amendment
amendment.
passes unanimously. We'll vote on,
The first amendment. The public comments off
okay, so this is about
and to
We'll get it
implement
started
after the
with
city manager
with
is hired.
public comments off and implemented, when we're fully staffed.
Okay, Councilmember Brummer?
Aye.
Councilmember Hines?
Aye.
Councilmember Katarna?
Aye.
Councilmember Fuller?
All right. All right. That amendment, that will go to the main motion.
Okay, Councilmember Hines?
Aye.
Councilmember Foley?
Aye.
Councilmember Brummer?
Aye.
And Councilmember Katarna?
Aye.
All right, so pass it unanimously, moving forward on social media accounts. And we'll get to work on that, but I do agree with having a city manager in place. I mean, if I was staff, I'd be a little bit worried. Having a manager that's going to be very local. Number 13, on rainwater collection section of the code, consider how to provide incentives to residents to move toward greater implementation of rainwater collection. This is yours.
Yes, I move that we discuss and consider an update to the rainwater collection section of the code, of the Wood Creek City Code, and consider how to provide incentives to residents to move forward with greater implementation of rainwater collection.
I second.
Seconded by Councilmember Brummer. Speak to this.
Yeah, so, rainwater collection has become more common and less expensive. The state has actually passed, code regulation essentially requiring that cities incentivize this, promote it, work towards greater implementation of it. We're also sitting in a record-breaking drought right now. I think we're all very aware of water concerns at this point in time, more than we ever have been. So in your packet, you have the introduction to this, and I provide you some code and law references that you can read on your own time that sort of set up the policies regulating this. That's on page 23 with the introduction of the item. 25. And then on page 26, you have the beginning of our actual code. So right now, our rainwater collection code is buried in our impervious coverage code. And a lot of this stems back from the work we did with the Cypress Creek Watershed Protection Plan. And so it's great. It's in good alignment. There's a couple of things that I'll bring up here in a minute that need to be tweaked for sure. The next thing is what I was referencing about the Texas, they had this bill that passed and essentially was like municipalities need to encourage rainwater. They need to do what they can to promote it and not stand in the way of it. So that is what you have in reference on page 29 I'm paraphrasing, there's a lot of legalese there that goes in depth more. My first suggestion and my first area of concern is that we reference, so we reference this code, right, as like, read more about this code if you want to know about rainwater collection and the guidelines for it. All of that is based on cities who own their wastewater, which we don't. So there are no guidelines there for us in regards to getting credits back or how to, you know, implement these systems in the city, do anything.
I apologize, but it's time for my wife's medication.
Alright. So with that in mind, I would like to work on something that's a little bit more specific to Wood Creek. The one thing that we do give right now is essentially the tank itself won't count towards your previous coverage, so it doesn't like impact your ground cover measurements. I happened to run into some of the Waverly Valley Watershed people at the cafe just randomly last week, and I kind of picked their brain about this. And the one thing he reminded me of, and Novak in particular, was like to give him, because my goal was maybe to consider impervious coverage credit for the whole system, because the county kind of does something like that. And I was wanting to mirror what the county does. He was like, the one concern with that is that some people might install a rain barrel, let it fill up, and never use it. And so then you basically pave more ground and you've hurt yourself by allowing them to put in this impervious coverage via credit, and they're not actually using the rainwater system. So that was his one thing. And then David Baker mentioned, well, my quick fix for that is to have two tanks required. One tank for catchment, one tank for holding. And then he mentioned Wood Creek lots can be kind of small. And just like everything, you know, the size of your lot is going to limit what you can do sometimes. We can't foresee all of those limitations. For example, whoever lived in my house before maxed out the impervious cover, maxed it out, right? Like it's had multiple add-ons. I could never do anything with that property. And in fact, technically it's way over, right? So if anybody ever wanted to do something with that property, you'd have to take off almost 2 whole rooms, right? So I was writing an ordinance for this. I got pretty far in at that time because I wanted y'all's input before I spent any more time, and I wanted whatever came before council to be well thought out and really full and having, you know, so today was just a discussion. There's no ordinance to pass. We might even consider sending this to other boards down the way, but I just wanted to get your initial feedback on directions and ways to incentivize rainwater collection.
I think it's a great idea. I think our code is probably a little bit out of date, and we're trying. So I encourage you to continue those efforts. I think talking to the Waverly Valley Watershed Association people is a good idea. So yeah, there's got to be, you know, we may want to break this out even instead of putting it in an impervious cover section, and give it its own section or section. And yeah, to encourage folks to the extent that they can. These are smaller lots, but to encourage folks to do that. And certainly as we go forward with this commercial development, we really want to push that because you know, you see what HEB did. They did a great job. What's the restaurant down at the bypass? Yeah, Hillie's has a nice set up. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to try and bring that up to speed and maybe break it out so it's easier for people to find.
No, I think that, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've been looking at this now for at least a dozen years, you know, from being on council before. And trying to kind of figure out what a mandated for new development, for instance, that's what they were looking at, you know, basically patio homes right above the creek, in the area that we've annexed since. But you know, if you're going to do that, you have to require that you do capture and just also sort of mitigation, and it's difficult. And then I said, well, what if I want to put a tank on my property and capture rainwater for my, well, okay, that's fine as long as you have, 51% masonry on it. I'm like, well, and then I had someone call because they were trying to see what they could do to increase their impervious cover. But they were, again, one of these homes that was built, they bought the home and it was already built to maximum impervious cover. And all they wanted to do was, put a little deck in. And I said, well, let's look into that. And sure enough, you go in there and say, oh, you can apply for credit if you have rainwater capture. And then when we went in to say, well, how do you issue the credit? How do you determine like roof area versus amount of water captured and then turn that into a percentage? We didn't have any way to calculate that. So it's been very frustrating, to get to the, to get to this. So to focus on it and have some, state background, Water Development Board, and others say, well, what have we been doing? I mean, the best we've ever been able to do, in my case, was to be able to get a discounted rain barrel, when we were in Austin. Still have that rain barrel on. Quickly?
Yes, ma'am. 2 sentences. I concur with you on that completely. I recall a lot of the work that was done 12 years ago, and I agree this is really important. And I also think that we must keep in mind that there are opportunities, as I know we all were interested in, as you all have been, in opportunities for grants and for various funding incentives. And I think if this were done, and if this were one of the items that maybe the city was able to take care of, that might be not only an incentive, for community, but for us to obtain potential grants.
Yeah, one of the advantages that we have now that we didn't have 12 years ago is that, the state and the county and others have really taken this seriously and make it a little bit easier to find ways to incentivize saving our water. We just don't have that much. We know, that Aqua Texas is like, right at the peak at how much they can deliver already. So and more people are moving to the area, and they're just like, where's the water come from?
And more federal opportunities, as well as some of the major grants. So that's something to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also, this is a great idea, I'm glad you're pursuing this, we gotta update this kind of regulation. My question is, do we have any idea how many, properties have this type of, system installed now?
I have not driven the neighborhood and looked at that. I know a lot of people have the garden variety, meaning they have catchment coming off of their existing gutters and they use it, they're real small barrels and they likely use it to water, if it's a still functioning system. What's available now and some of the things that have changed over the last 2 decades is that now you can legally run your entire house off of rainwater. That was not permissible before, and there are regulations in place with how you do that safely because you don't want a confluence of the waters in the system. So, I don't have all of the answers right now for this, and I don't know how many people are using it. I do know that it would benefit the entire valley if more of us collected rainwater in general because of the amount of runoff that we have through our city and high. So we're privileged to these really massive rain events, right? That's just like deluge of rain. And a lot of that just flushes into the creeks. And if we could capture more of it and slow it down through, rainwater collection, permaculture, gardening, those kind of principles, and good drainage infrastructure, then we would really start recharging our aquifer. And then if we use rainwater to water our gardens, we're reducing the burden on the aquifer. So,
it's also better for the plants.
It is better for the plants, yes, than the treated water that makes my hands smell like bleach. That's why I wash dishes. But one of the things that cities do often is offer a credit. So there is a formula for what you were talking about before. It's in so we reference these other documents and you have to go dig for it. And it's this really confusing formula that takes a mathematician to run. And it's doable. And we could even make a chart. I was working on a chart to make it easier to quick reference for staff. The problem again is all of that is based off of cities that own their wastewater because it's actually a wastewater credit on their bill. It's like what Austin does for solar panels. You don't you don't, stop using Austin electricity, they send you a check for your credit back, for the energy you gave back. So that's how they're doing rainwater in a lot of these places. There's nothing to say that we can't forge a new way. There's no rule saying we can't. The one thing that I don't want to do is start permitting people paving over more land without actually utilizing the rainwater collection, right? We're shooting ourselves in the foot with that. So maybe the two rainwater. The other thing I would think that the city could consider is just a straight credit back. You know,
Well,
install a barrel. Depending on the barrel size, you give X amount of dollars, you know?
So since we're just discussing all the ideas,
Yes.
and I think that we'll continue to come up with the ideas and come up with the ordinance.
Mayor, also I wanted to point out that 2.212.002 and 212.003 has specific language that allows, there may be an opportunity to include rainwater harvesting language in the code as it relates to the ETJ. We need to look into more of the cases of that. So it could actually be a separate location from what we're thinking right now for this ordinance. But also, we could also include rainwater harvesting language in possibly a development agreement code. There's just ways that we can, granted, it would be scattered about, which is not always necessarily good, but it might be a good way to do it. Also, to kind of point to Mayor Whitehead's comment, we are actually pursuing grants that relate to floodplains and can be applied to this kind of issue. I'm actually working on it right now.
We're also talking, well, I can't say the thing, sorry. I'm not, there's some potential good news on the horizon, but I'm not in the review side. Sorry.
Sure. Do we know if any of the new construction is taking this into consideration? Because when you talk to people about collection, some people have, oh, we got a barrel here, but we only get one side of our roof. So they lose motivation. It'd be great if that was, I don't know if we could require that as a zoning kind of.
I know that Councilor and Councilmember Byrne have had some conversation about, how we can, what we can do legally, to, if not require, at least, ask nicely, for new development to consider this as part of the building program, instead of as an afterthought in an hour.
Nice.
All right, so really the motion on the floor was to discuss, any action to be taken, we'll just continue the discussions offline and bring it back.
Yeah, I was also just kind of wanting to see how we, I assumed people could be on board, but, the work going into the ordinance was getting very tempting to me and lazy, and I just kind of had to pause and say, you know what, I need to check in and see if I'm moving in the right direction at all. And so it sounds like, just to recap, everybody's on board. You gave me a lot of really great recommendations. I think reaching out to some of these organizations like the Wimberley Valley Watershed, Cypress Creek Protection, Meadow Center, all of these people, and sort of getting more feedback, I'll go ahead and do that and kind of maybe try to produce some more concrete documents for us to move forward.
All right, so we'll move on to item number 14, stop sign at Brook Hollow at the south intersection of Augusta Drive.
Yeah, I would like to move that council consider the placement of a new additional stop sign to go in at the location of the south intersection of Augusta Drive with Brook Hollow.
This is
Second for discussion.
So this, so if you look at your packet, it's item 14, and it takes you to page 30, and that's the introduction, and then it moves into a map. And so this map was generated in our future land use workshop, and it was this really cool interactive thing where you took these ribbons and you highlighted essentially like where you walk or where you'd like to really be able to walk, and then they compiled all of that data together and establish this concept of like, where are residents walking and where would they like to walk? And the map highlighted the specific section right after South Augusta Drive on Brook Hollow as a high intensity pedestrian area. And if you look at that area, there's 3 roads intersecting in a short space. And anybody who has driven over there has seen that there is limited visibility. There's also a lot of obstructions on the side of the road. There's a bunch of rocks now placed on the side of the road. So anybody trying to exit quickly to get out of the way of vehicles doesn't really have a safe place to go. And so by slowing traffic down in this area, I think we would prevent more accidents. I've heard now from residents who have lived here more recently, longer than me, about accidents in this area, that they have been occurring, and that this has kind of been an area of concern for a while. And we've talked about, maybe we don't use stop signs to slow traffic, right? They're not the most effective traffic calming measure in that regard, but they are used to regulate the flow of traffic and to really let people know what to do here. And some people have mentioned the stop sign at Jack Miller too. I'm not saying anything about that right now. The reason why Augusta Drive is the target for this ordinance is because it is a higher volume of vehicles traveling on that road. So as far as like traffic regulation, that intersection would come first in that.
It was first. I walked through there as well, and it does get a little strange. So this is what our land use workshop feedback and study demonstrated. That's where a lot of people walk in this area, right?
Yeah, this is where they would like to be walking. And talking to people, a lot of them are already walking these paths. And if you notice, it's like for safety issues, don't walk and bike on the golf course. And so again, the whole concept was like, where are we lacking in pedestrian safety and mobility?
So the open circle there is
That's the
where the stop sign would be.
So that open circle is where the stop sign is being proposed. It would create a 3-way stop there, because there's already one stop sign there. So you're stopping traffic on Brook Hollow. And if you look at those 2 closed circles, that was the high intensity area of where people want pedestrian mobility.
Point of information, so when you're going south on, south on Brook Hollow, there isn't a stop sign.
So if you look at page 35, you'll actually see the highlights. So to add a stop sign in the city, you have to do this ordinance. You have to add it to this table, this chart. And so the highlighted portion would be the new stop sign. So there would be 2 on Brook Hollow Drive going northwest and southeast at Augusta Drive. It controls the traffic at Brook Hollow in that south intersection of Augusta Drive.
Yeah.
The financial impact is $1,200 to $2,000. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold it, man. Can somebody please show me on the city map up there exactly where it is that you're planning on putting the stop sign?
You know where Jack Miller is?
Okay. There is a stop sign there already
Yeah,
coming down
No, not on
on Western Drive.
not where?
Brook Hollow.
And just one other really quick comment. And I really appreciate the consideration. Isn't this item already being considered by the comprehensive plan group?
That one, actually, it's the platinum.
Excuse me, platinum groups.
The platinum road.
They have not yet made
Yeah,
recommendations.
I was waiting for comments, but yeah, in
Sorry.
fact, Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun brought that, to
Yeah.
our attention in an email earlier today, since she couldn't be here, that, this is actually, on the radar of the Platinum Roads channel, along with potential other,
Well, I was actually at that meeting and this was brought up as an agenda item and they were discussing it. So I just wondered if you all needed to know that you're discussing something that they haven't yet brought to you.
To be fair, this item and this agenda was submitted before that was posted. Council has already discussed this item as well, a long time ago, and there was a lot of signs discussed, and so Platinum Panel is discussing more signs in general. And it is true that they have not made a specific recommendation on additional signs in general. And this was one of the intersections they discussed. I was watching that meeting, that portion of it in particular, because like I said, I had already submitted this item. That agenda was published. I was not aware that they had put it on their agenda. So, I did watch what they talked about. I know that traffic studies have been brought up. They can be expensive. I think that the reason why I wanted to move forward with this is that I believe that we have plenty of data showing us that this intersection could use a little traffic control. And, you know, especially with La Rosa Lane being open right now, there's more traffic than ever pouring in that section of the neighborhood. And they're coming down for college.
No, I mean, I think the roads committee is looking at the macro picture in terms of how we're gonna tackle fixing our roads and, you know, those fundings and all that. I don't need to wait for them to make a decision on a particular stop sign area. I mean, I've always thought that was a good idea, so I'm ready to move forward now.
To piggyback on what Deborah said, and so my advice is consistent with what I recall saying about 3 years ago. There was a comment to section 544002 transportation code where the Texas manual on uniform traffic control devices emphasizes the necessity of engineering judgment. It does not mandate it, but it does emphasize the necessity. So,
But, yeah, thanks, but we have plenty stop signs out here without engineering studies. I think it's gonna set costs, but it's advisory as well.
You know, there are a couple of things here. I think the engineering studies will hold it up, as you know, works or whoever the engineers are that work on it, but I want that stretch every day, almost every day. And not only, you know, is there, you know, significant traffic coming, you know, in off of, Roca, Augusta, Brook Hollow, then up Brook Meadow, down and around, but also it's a great amount of traffic going into and out of Camp Judea. And it's also the school bus route. I mean, as you see the school bus goes, you know, up Brook Hollow, comes all the way around Augusta Drive, and then back on the Brook Hollow again. And I've seen that be a little bit spooky on more than one occasion. I would support this going forward, possibly, you know, with the caveat that the council supports this. I want word to I want to figure out how we get to the Platinum Roads panel and say, you know, thank you for looking into this. You know, we just, you know, felt like, you know, it's sort of a no-brainer and move forward on it. But I don't want to undermine their work.
Yeah, one of the things I remember from that discussion, I didn't take notes in it, and you know, the audio was a little bit difficult for me, but they were concerned about double stop signs with Jack Miller, and so that was the one thing that I was like, yes, I don't know that we need double stop, you know, and I think just one, and with Augusta being the primary, the more significant road, I think that's relevant, and so that's why I originally chose it too.
In terms of a financial impact, how do you get the numbers $1,200 to $2,000? Seems like a big range. How do you price something like this?
Because we've installed, so we have to do a breakaway stop sign now. They got to be a certain height and a certain, their regulation that goes in. And so the actual placement of the breakaway stop sign is, you know, you set the base. It doesn't even have a pole yet, and then the pole attaches to the base so that the car or a bus, you know, hits the sign, it just breaks off instead of bends and causes more damage. And it's more expensive, and so it sort of depends on the bid we get for installation. They've been coming in about 50.
I think we need bigger stop signs as well, and we would need to take the roads, so.
Yeah, so there's a choice.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? So we'll call the vote.
Councilmember Brummer,
Aye.
Councilmember Hines,
Aye.
Councilmember Scarpa,
Aye.
Councilmember Fuller.
Aye. Unanimous, 4 ayes. Would you, Councilmember Hines, would you work with me and staff on, just so making sure that we manage the process? And, just as we go up into, just sort of spec it out.
Yeah, whatever you need. I'm on board.
Thank you. Number 15, is to discuss and take appropriate action on the mitigation of mold in City Hall. I thought that was mine, but I'll let you have it.
And somehow got both of our names on it. You're in the cover sheet.
But you suffer, so I'll let you talk.
Yeah, I would like to move that council consider taking action on addressing mold mitigation in City Hall as identified by Capolago Home Inspection.
Second. Councilmember Drummer. Sure.
So I've been
We haven't
experiencing,
gotten the report yet.
We got the report, but we didn't get, we didn't look at it well enough to determine what the number's gonna mean. It's just a report of numbers. And of course, they did identify that ventilation system.
Good, thank you.
so I've been getting headaches when I work in here. Any significant amount of time, every time I leave with a headache. And I identified that it was not too much coffee or lack of food or lack of sleep over the many, many months. And I finally, it dawned on me one day that there might be mold. And I have had some experience with mold in a structure before. And I asked Maureen, hey, have y'all ever mold tested? And she goes, no, but a previous council member also used to have headaches. And
That was Mayor Pro Tem Nancy Brittner.
Yeah.
And she had, and severe, bronchial congestion and cough too. Yeah, leave the room.
yeah, so I've also, in realization, been experiencing other symptoms. And then I brought my daughter up here briefly the other day. And when she left, she started having symptoms and they've since gone, but it was like immediate. And when they came in and inspected, they found mold all up in our AC system, which that's where I've had issues with it as well. In fact, my Wood Creek house here, we had to do a huge mold mitigation thing. So I would like to recommend that council approve a minimum of $3,000. I believe we might need to go higher. I would recommend $6,000 for mold mitigation. Because in talking with the gentleman while he was here, he mentioned there's a lot of things we potentially need to do, and I don't know if they've identified the mold type yet, but he was talking about potentially needing to rip up the carpets, definitely having them professionally serviced for, like, it's not just a carpet cleaning, it's like this whole other thing. And then the other thing is, I know in my own experience, you sometimes have to replace whole portions of the venting. There can be UV light insulation, which those can be expensive. There can be needing to add additional soffits in the attic space itself, like the way it vents. And then there's mold, and everybody's running, like, yeah. No.
Beginning to get a headache.
Yeah. And so it is a public, it's a serious health concern. It can really impact people. And I just want to make sure that we have enough money.
You want to admit that,
I think it should go up to 6,000.
I mean, it's just not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
Without going back to council.
Right.
And the reason it came in at 3,000 is because I was talking to him and looking at things like, thoroughly shampoo the carpet first, and then if that didn't do it, then we go back to the well. So that's where the $3,000 came from. And I think the number is, you can't just say the appropriate amount. So
Right.
I'd like to, for budget purposes, set, a ceiling of $6,000. This seems reasonable.
I second your amendment. Mayor? I also wanted to point out that the LCRA grant does City Hall improvements, and they're actually in the process of accepting applications for the January 2023 cycle. So we could actually start hitting for that time. Granted, that would take time to actually show up, but that doesn't prevent us from moving forward.
Who do they need to see?
LCRA.
They do specifically have grants for improving city hall, especially for this.
I just want to say, I'm in favor of mitigating the mold. I just need to see more documentation as to what they found, what the money is going to go for. I mean, this can kind of become, there was a big mold scare a long time ago, and it became kind of a boondoggle where I don't want to fall into the kind of that. I want to fix it, but I don't want to get ripped off either. So,
We just didn't have enough time to get the report,
Right.
put it in the packet.
So I mean, what's the process? If we vote to approve it, then you figure what we're gonna do, then you come back to us and say, here's what we're gonna do, or we just write the check.
We're not writing any checks until, we say, according to the report, we need to do these things.
Yeah.
And then we add. We're just setting the budget.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's what I like to see before we authorize an expenditure. I wanna see really what we've got going here. If this guy's telling us a straight story or not.
Well, just to be clear, if we did vote today, you would be authorizing an expenditure of up to $6,000 for mold mitigation. And he is submitting a formal report that does document the mold, and it usually comes with photos, air samples, all kinds of things. And then he only makes recommendations. He is not the mold. You actually have to go to another company, and by our policies, we would have to go out for 3 bids on the mold mitigation work. So there isn't that risk of this guy saying we have mold and then give me, 10 grand to fix your mold problem, right? He's independent. He is not.
We got.
What I'm saying, before I vote to say, let's spend $6,000, I want to know what we're spending it on. And if, our next meeting's the 14th, why don't we firm it up and then we can make an informed decision of what we're going to do, what we're going to authorize. I don't want to authorize $6,000 today.
Okay, so you want to get a copy of the report and then put it back on the agenda for the 14th?
Yeah, I mean, I want to fix it, but I just want to be careful, man.
Mayor, man, question on, were you in discussion with this individual?
Yes, someone.
I was here.
Did he have, like a time frame? A recommendation for a time frame, like, is this urgent, like maybe we should be sitting here?
So,
He writes a report on, it's all factual, it's all.
I just didn't know,
Here's
like,
the pictures of the mold, here's the readings of the mold, but it doesn't make any opinions like that this is urgent or.
okay. Well, I was just wondering if there is this 2-week delay, is it something we could turn around with a vote today? And go, okay, we call the guy in, and we start going up for bids.
we don't call him back in. I mean, he submitted his report, his job is done.
So we go up for 3 bids.
Then we go up, so based on the interpretation of the report, if it shows that, it's black mold or whatever, then we definitely have to take care of this, and the sooner the better. Then we go out on the bid process for the companies that come in and actually do the mitigation.
So
And it could be a long run.
and in sensitivity to Councilmember Pulley's comments, maybe we adjust the motion to be, could we get the possibility of 3 bids in the next?
I don't think that's realistic.
It's not
Sorry,
No,
I'm speaking for you, but the way how long it takes people to respond sometimes. I mean, it took me almost 2 weeks to get a response on the stickers from professionals that I adore and trust and respect. But,
I'm trying to streamline how we could get this going.
so I respect Councilmember Pulley's objections or concerns. I would just like to reiterate that essentially we're advocating, by allowing $6,000, and we can bump it back down to $3,000, but by saying we approve this, we're authorizing staff to go to bids and to start getting in action once, those bids would still go before Mayor Rasco. Councilmember Pulley could still have access to them. But for me, it's a health concern. I leave here with burning in my chest and feeling like I cannot breathe as appropriately as I used to. Now, that doesn't have to be black mold to have, black mold is a serious public health hazard and we should not have City Hall open if we have that. Other molds do cause problems and real health issues.
Yeah,
So,
my point or goal is to facilitate whatever motion needs to happen to have it as soon as we can get it done. Because I don't want it to hurt anyone.
Well, we could recess and we could go look at the report from that.
Well, yeah, I mean, from an open meeting standpoint, you got a problem too. I mean, if I go in the back room and look at something, I don't know. I mean, it's just, if someone comes to my door and says, you got a problem, give me $6,000, I'll fix it. I'm like, well, no,
And that's not what that's not what happened.
Well, that's to me. I mean, I have no idea what's going on, and I'm supposed to sign off on $6,000, and I'm not, until I know what the problem is, and this is okay, and you can fix it. I want to fix it, but it just doesn't feel right.
a mold professional documented existing mold specifically in our AC unit structure, and he shared concerns over the carpet because mold lives in the carpet. He gave verbal confirmation to myself and the mayor because I happened to be here. Maureen was also there. He has also submitted a formal report documenting the mold and providing pictures. He is an independent contractor. He would not be doing the work. He is no longer financially involved in the process. He benefits from nothing aside from the expenditure and his services to me.
So what was the next step, getting bids, was that?
Well, no, first, we either approve or amend or do something with this motion. We've already amended it. We do something with this motion. If this motion passes today, then we are authorized to go out for bid. Based on the report that Casa Lago Home Inspection did. And then we see, what that looks like. I mean, those bids may come in and we just say, there's no way we can do all of that. I mean, up to, not to exceed means $0 to $6,000. If it comes in cheaper, then it comes in cheaper. If it comes in more, then we go back to council and say, hey, the bids we got were well above the 6,000. What are we going to do?
I mean, here's what I can agree to. Let's, authorize, let's go out for bid, and then come back and look at the bids. We'll get a chance to look at the report and then vote. I don't want to vote to one check today, but let's vote to put it out for bid and then authorize to pay those bids when they come in and then vote on that. I think that's the right way to do it. I just can't go, let's spend $6,000. I'm not even clear what the problem is. I mean, I understand the problem. I don't understand exactly what's being proposed. So I would vote to just approve going out for bid. Let's get that going.
So you're asking to amend the motion to say that we take appropriate action on mitigation of mold as identified and to go out for bid on mitigation?
Yeah.
I think that the motion would be to go out for bids not to exceed $6,000, provided however, final acceptance of those bids is subject to council approval.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. What he said.
What he said, I second what he said.
No, he said.
I know,
No,
that's your words.
He said.
You can incorporate it by reference.
Incorporated by reference, what I said.
Okay. Brent's amendment
Yep, and I
using
seconded.
council reports. Brent's seconded by Councilmember Brewer.
So what does that put us? Is just an amendment?
We're amending the original motion to go out for bid not to exceed $6,000. And so it goes back to the council.
Frankly, I don't know if we need to put a cap on the bid and they bid whatever they're gonna bid. And then we vote on that. So I would say, motion is to,
Could I get a point of information, maybe it'd be helpful? Sure. Maureen, could you read the original?
Deborah moved that the council take action on the mold in City Hall.
And then.
Not to exceed 6,000.
No, the first,
Oh, that would be no concept.
now can you read the second section? The amendment, first amendment.
That it should not exceed $6,000. to take the action on the mold.
And then mine was, to,
Go out for
Put it out
bids
for bid.
and put it, and give the final approval of the bids such as.
All right. Start voting on Councilmember.
So are we just drawing any of the motions?
it kind of has to each other.
I mean, we can withdraw the dollar amount, or we can go back to the dollar amount, and just vote it down, but it's probably easier. I mean, this is your motion, Councilmember.
I'm gonna be honest, I would prefer staff to start dealing with it immediately. I don't really want any delays. I'm experiencing health consequences already.
But doesn't Councilmember Police,
It delays it.
no, that's, we're going out to bid, we're going out to bid based on the report.
But there's no authorization for staff to act and start doing anything about it, if that makes sense. They go for bid, and then that has to be presented at a councilman meeting whenever it's ready. And then we have to vote on that, and then they can take action. And I principle, I 100% agree with them, and that the proper way for business to occur is, as he's stating, I just personally I'm not a big fan of mold, and I would prefer we start going as soon as we get it. That's one, and
I think to my way of thinking, if what the amendment does is go out for bids immediately, it seems to speed up the process and slow it down. But they go out for bids, we get the 3 bids, and we come back and say, this is what it's gonna be, what are we gonna do?
But what?
Which we would have to do anyway. We would still have to bring the, so what if all the bids came back at $6,009? We would have to.
there's a couple things here. So in dealing with this, you're not working with one company. You can hire a mold mitigation company and they provide a handful of these services. What you will likely find is that you are going to need to contact AC companies separately from the carpet. And that the whole scale mold mitigation companies will typically have a higher charge on their services because of what they do, versus, without seeing the report and knowing, so if it's black mold, we have to use a mold mitigation company, period. That sets off a whole series of other legal things that we need to do. If it's not black mold, you can absolutely hire an AC company and have them come in and perform the necessary things like replacing the filter, putting in a UV light, the soffits, the replacing of ductwork. They might need to replace the whole unit, which is why I recommended moving up to $6,000, because your interior handler can be infested with mold. If you were seeing it visibly, that means it's on the outside of the ductwork. So whether you didn't speak to, you did say we need to redo the filter. And so, depending on what staff has to do, they might be going out for 3 bids with multiple companies, or they might be going, and then by our policy, we're supposed to do projects like this as a whole, meaning like, we should look at it as a package in the way that we spend the money and not be like, oh, this is only $500. We're gonna, just do the carpet. By policy, we're supposed to lump projects. So.
We gotta get bids though, right? So if I may.
The only difference between what you're recommending is I'm saying staff and the mayor authorized to spend $6,000 after they receive their bids and move forward with taking care of the report. Period. The difference that you want to do is have the report published, which would probably happen on the 14th, go out for bids. Maybe they get 3 by the 14th, maybe they don't. We wait for the bids to come in, then council puts it on an agenda, and then council votes. That could take anywhere from 2 weeks to a month versus.
I just hate spending money without knowing exactly what's going on. I know it's bugging me, but it just bothers me. Like I say, if someone knocked on my door and said, you got a problem, give me $6,000, I'll fix it. I'll be like, no, I think this is what you're talking about. And I need to take some other bids. All I'm saying is, let's go ahead and put it up for bid, and then we can go on our next meeting, That's the way you spend other people's money, just don't Here, just check it.
Can I ask for clarification? So now that I'm hearing this more, so we already have a report that says that there's issues from a specific or specialist who does this. In authorizing $6,000, where council is saying, hey, city staff and mayor, you could begin after this. Like there's certain things could happen. What if first thing the guy says off the list is change that filter, it's $50. Well, you can go check that one off. Correct? Is that if I make?
Yeah, and actually staff and the mayor, or the acting city manager is authorized to spend up to $1,500 anyway without having to run it by us. So
So we're
this just extends that cap and says, yeah, start dealing with the mole, is, you know. And again, I don't disagree with Councilmember Foley out of principle. I definitely believe that the best way to do business would be that. I just personally don't want any delays on this, and I will stop making that point. I've made it, but I've spent a lot of time here, and I'm feeling that.
Is this the same report that was done when Linda Land was here?
No, it's new.
It's new, okay. Because that was just mold and the drip thing. I don't know where that report is, I haven't seen it, okay.
Nothing,
It's
Darva?
definitely more than that.
So can we take, Councilmember Foley's amendment, which I like a whole lot, and simply put a ceiling over how much we could spend before we have to bring it back to council? I mean, I don't see anything slowing down with this proposal.
Finish bids and then go proceed up to $200.
But we put a ceiling on it if we like.
You guys are more than welcome to vote. We don't always have to agree on everything, and I disagree with them on principle. I just personally don't want to do that. I can say I can vote no, there's nothing wrong with that. You guys are willing to, if you all like it, that's free vote. I lose, I'm fine with that. I just have a different opinion.
Chapter, the competitive bid chapter, under 252.022, does not apply to a procurement necessary to serve and protect public health or safety of municipalities.
So we're gonna have to take up for bid. What I'm saying is, I don't know what we're spending money on. And if we're gonna, are we not gonna get bids, we just hire anybody we want then?
The argument is certainly, well, then it's less than 50,000. Then if it's less than 3,000, then, I mean, listen, there is a good basis for at this point, if this hasn't been identified as the exact case, I can't remember the exact type of mold. But if the city wants to bring out a good, capable, competent, qualified HVAC professional to inspect the system and determine if there's some deficiency in the system that is causing an excessive amount of humidity resulting in mold, the city can do that. I mean, because am I correct that all that's been identified at this point is the existence of mold?
Truthfully, but I haven't had a chance to read the report.
Okay,
Just
that's,
but there's definitely some identified.
right. So I guess the next step then is to identify the remedy to the existence of the mold. Then that's going to be some, more likely than not, HVAC professional, unless we want to bring out a mold expert to test the mold and determine if the mold is in fact.
He's done that. And he's providing a list of recommendations based on his findings, and then it would be up to the city and staff to pursue those recommendations. And there's probably gonna be a tier to them, meaning high priority, low priority. There's probably gonna be identification of area. And like I said, I've been through this twice now on 2 different houses, and so I'm a little bit familiar with the process, but depending on what the report says, and I understand wanting the report, I was here and he was like, yeah, I got mold up there. And it's not, and he did not indicate it's small enough, and he expressed concerns on the park.
So I do think that it's going to be hopefully a series of small jobs. you know, and maybe one, I mean, get it from HVAC and really has a problem, that can be pretty expensive. I will say that, you know, I did a run on our budget for the year. I mean, we are 1 month away from the end of the fiscal year. So this is like what's left in the bank right now. And we do have, you know, almost $3,000 in city hall maintenance and repairs budget. That is available, that is budgeted, you know, can be spent. This is a perfect place for it. There's also like 50,000 in contingency reserve. We're going to end up not spending our people's money as much as it was budgeted to do. So we can do this without, you know, a setback. I like having a dollar figure just to shoot. If we're going out for bid, I like having a dollar value to shoot for, just so that we know that, oh, now it's going to be a problem, you know, or hey, this is easy. Like for instance, I mean, I can go down to Ace and pick up the filter, you know, on the way home, and you know, get it replaced, and it's, you know, what, $30, you know, so it's like we can piecemeal it. That doesn't have to be clumped together, just things that we know we need to do. But based on this report, I think we'll find some other things that, you know, could be a problem. And so I like, personally, I like the idea of going out, based on the report, getting the proper people around the table, you know, get it mitigated, have a dollar figure in mind. And that, but we can always say that's over the ceiling.
And then that would come back.
We're gonna have to go do something else.
If it's over the ceiling.
If it's over the ceiling, it would come back.
I would be willing to lower it back down to $3,000 to be safer. I just truly believe it's going to end up being.
Yeah, it might
Close to
be,
6 grand.
but I think it'd be a good idea, as Jeff saying, if, you know, let's get the process started, authorize $3,000 for now, and if it's more to it, then come back to us and show us what's going on. You know, I mean, we can go there.
I really do wish that we'd have a report and enough time to have an impact and review.
Yeah.
So,
I hear you, I do, but I think if we just say, okay, we'll spend $3,000 on it right now, meantime, let's get the report, let's get, you know, a bid or whatever we need, whomever, and start seeing what we're gonna do. But yeah, I can look at that. You gotta be kind of careful, because I've been in situations where party A says there's not much mold, party B says, yeah, there's a ton of mold, you gotta repaint the whole place, or you gotta tear the whole place down, or you gotta, you know, do all this stuff. So there is kind of a latitude in terms of what the proper mitigation approach is. So I don't want to just go, yeah, spend whatever, and then you're not asking for that. I can live with, say, go back to $3,000, spend that now to take immediate action. In the meantime, come back and we can go over that, and we'll look at it and vote on that, you know, because it may end up being $10,000. I mean, you know.
So we withdraw both amendments sitting on the table and move forward with the original motion.
Authorize up to $3,000. Meantime, we're getting bids or whatever process we go through to continue to look at what we gotta do.
I will withdraw my amendment. Will you do the same?
Yeah. All
I
right.
would like to make the amendment to state $3,000.
well, that's not an amendment.
In my original motion, I just said to take
I'll
action,
let you know.
and because I intended to bump it up, because
Okay, so
So the motion is that council take immediate action on the mold in City Hall with a limit not to exceed $3,000.
Second, if we need one.
yes, then we have to vote on the $3,000 and then vote on.
yeah, so the amendment is, the reason I'm confused is I'm looking at $3,000. Yeah, so the amendment is, not to exceed 3,000.
Oh, I have that in the motion.
Yeah, but it's actually an amendment, so we have to vote the amendment. The original motion from Councilmember Hine was 6,000.
Okay, so now we're voting on the amendment.
We're voting on the amendment to reduce it to 3,000, the original number.
Okay. Councilmember Foley,
Okay.
Councilmember Zorba,
That was.
you didn't vote?
Not yet, I'm confused what we're voting. Okay, it's not to exceed 3,000, that's what we're voting on.
That's
We're voting to actually go back to the 3,000 that was in the original document. Our motion was
Take it out. Okay, so we're voting, to go back to three thousand. We're done.
Yeah, so this is the vote to three.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Councilmember Catarba?
Aye.
Councilmember Hines?
Aye.
Councilmember Brummer?
All right, so that passes unanimously. Okay, so we'll vote on the main motion.
Aye. Councilmember Hines?
Aye.
Councilmember Foley?
Aye.
Councilmember Brummer?
Aye.
And Councilmember Catarba?
Aye.
All right, as I mentioned, we're not going to take up 17, so the last item on the agenda is item number 16, which is discuss and take appropriate action on removing trees identified as dead or impossible to save in the city right of way. As identified by the tree board and staff and following tree ordinance regulations. And I put a cap on this. I put this one in. I put a cap on this at $5,000.
I move that we proceed with the removal of deceased trees in the public right of way with the amount of the work not to exceed $5,000.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Catarba. And I just want to point out, so we've already identified four or those. So there's a couple on Brook Meadow. There's the one on Brook Hollow, 16 Brook Hollow. There's 18 Country Lane. And then there's the tree in the Creekside Park. And those are just the ones that we've identified, right away. We're still going to look at that tree list and going to try to group some of this work together so that maybe we'll get some help on the pricing by getting it on the ones.
So thank you for mentioning Creekside Park. I wanted to verify that we were going to address that tree specifically. Because it said, the ordinance said city's right of way.
Oh, yeah, it's a public property.
Yeah.
We need to amend it.
Okay, so,
Say public property instead of right of way.
yeah, okay, city property.
So I'm gonna amend the motion to add and public property after public right of way.
A second?
And this is part of the budget component. I think we've got,
Under green space?
no, I'm looking at it under Oakville mitigation. This year's budget is like $15,000 in Oakville. Second is the amendment.
I think the second year.
Car budget?
It's car budget.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did the first one, I did the second. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Fine.
So this would just allow us to get some sort of plan and there are a couple of them, especially looking at the Brook Hollow and Country Lane properties. Those are like chunks falling out.
Might interject the possibility that when we deal with the tree at Creekside Park, if there is viable wood after removing the tree that could be used towards play structures on the premises, could we consider it?
We can consider
Mary.
it. Please.
So I just wanted to be clear that we haven't identified set of trees, just because our policy does say we're supposed to approve specific trees and not authorize. And when I say our policy, I'm specifically talking about our green space ordinance. Basically, we're supposed to know, like, so you've listed Country Lane, the address, 18, and then Brook Hollow, 60, and then in Creekside Park itself.
Mhm.
Okay, I think you're probably gonna max out your $5,000 with that work.
And Brook Meadow.
Oh, what's on Brook Meadow?
There are 2 trees on Brook Meadow. Is it 19?
21 and 23.
In the right of way,
They're in the right of way.
like in the street or?
No, they're in the right of way. They're not in this, they're not street trees. Well, they are street trees. they're off to the side.
Okay, I just want to be clear because we're supposed to document that and have that publicly known.
And those are the ones that, that I have personally identified. And only one of them, I mean, Jacob looked at 60 Brook Hollow and said, yeah, here's gotta go. So, we would ask, the arborists that we hire to do this work, what we have to, further identify, make sure it's not red oak. If it is oak wilt, which is presumed, at least we can then mitigate that out of that budget. I'd like to make this happen pretty quickly because we've only got a month in this budget year, and we might as well take care of it in this budget year if we can. That only gives us a few weeks.
I think even it's not oak wilt, it's fingers,
Yeah. Well, even if it's not oak wilt, I mean, it's still the same. But if it's oak wilt, we have to identify it in order to know how to dispose of it.
That's true. All right, you want to vote?
Yeah, we're voting on the amendment to call it right of way and public property.
Okay, Councilmember Scarpa,
Aye.
Councilmember Brummer,
Aye.
Councilmember Polly.
Aye.
And the amendment passes.
Can we, I know we're not gonna take action on number 17, but can we discuss it briefly?
We need to vote on the motion.
Okay, I just wanted to catch him before somebody's turn.
So now we're voting on the main motion.
Voting on the amendment.
Councilmember Fajardo.
Aye.
Councilmember Polly.
Aye.
Councilmember Hines.
Aye.
And Councilmember Crum.
All right, so that passes unanimously. And yeah, I tried to, on 17, I sort of made my case on that. It was, frankly, it was out of frustration. And I thought, okay, I've been acting as city manager, and acting as is not the same as the acting city manager. I mean, it's just easier to say I'm acting city manager. And I just needed to get some stuff done. I've been working with my hands tight behind my back, and it was just ludicrous and more out of frustration and anger than just brought into the items stuck in.
Don't type angry, Joe.
I know. This Councilmember Hines first, and then you.
So I just wanted to clarify, you're not receiving funds for your work. It's all volunteer, right?
Correct.
For the camera. So you have not been hired. And even if we had decided to move forward with going ahead and approving and saying, because when I saw this agenda, the way I interpreted it as was potentially maybe the city council should have said, yes, we approve of you to serve as in the city manager role for now while we look for someone else. And maybe we should have done that months ago. So that's the way I interpreted it. It did not occur to me that people were gonna think that we were hiring you and going to start paying you for this work.
I don't know.
Or like a retroactive fee for everything you've done. Mike, the reason why I wanted to talk about it though is that I just wanted to make sure that there's not really concerns with how we've been proceeding, correct? Like meaning that like you stepping in to fill in gaps with staff and in the maintenance and running of the city. I mean, you could be doing that even if there was a city manager, is that correct? Like the city manager could be like, here, take on this project if you'd like.
Well, I've been here almost all day, every day. Not every day, but a lot of days, since Britton left. I've tried my best to, help staff as I can, and to be here, to help us sit down. So, and a lot of the decisions aren't mayoral decisions, they're administrative. And it's just like, okay, somebody's got to do that. And staff, Maureen and Suzanne have done a fantastic job of stepping in. We were joking the other day, said, okay, Suzanne, you're the acting city manager. But it would still be the same thing. I was not aware, I didn't read the statute before I did this. Aurora brought it to my attention. She was very concerned after she had some phone calls from folks about that very thing. And so, no, you're going to be paying him to be, and she said, no. But, we started looking back at the dual employment role. It doesn't necessarily mean compensated employment. It's just serving in two roles at the same time.
Yeah, I guess the squirrely part about it is you can still do this differently to achieve the same result, because Class A general law municipality can either operate under Chapter 22 of the local government code and be an automatic form of government, which we are. The city could elect, however, to hold an election under Chapter 25 of the local government code and determine if it wants to be a city manager form of government. At which point, the city would then have to have a city manager. The city could then vote at some point in the future to not be a city manager form of government. However, under Chapter 25, the manager would still report to the council. Since we operate under Chapter 22, the manager is not a position we are required to have. This is a gratuitous position. Secretary, clerk, city attorney, city engineer, city marshal, those are positions that we are required. If this council or any future council decides to eliminate the position of city manager, it may do so. Furthermore, under the local government code and our code of ordinances, the council reserves the right at any point in time to assign to the mayor such additional duties as it wants to. So hypothetically speaking, at the next meeting, and just as a show of what the council wants, the council could take all of the duties from the city manager description and stick those under the mayor's title, which, but my whole point is.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
No salary.
Yeah, but my whole point is, you can still achieve the exact same result, but avoid this dual office thing because it's what the law allows.
Well, the other thing that has come up is like, as we call it, it clearly states that the mayor is the chief executive officer, of the city, regardless of whether you have a city manager or not. But in our form of government, in an automatic form of government, with or without a city manager, the city manager is not the CEO. The city manager is the city manager, and the mayor serves as CEO.
Well,
that's what was so frustrating to me as CEO. I couldn't get access to, and still can't vote. Just basic laws, just basic laws. For me to get anything, just 10 o'clock on Saturday night, I have to get Maureen to go into the files and grab it for me and send it. So it just doesn't. It was just frustrating.
Well, and I just one additional clarification on this. There is some duality to what the mayor for general office is anyway, because this is the legislative body. This is the board of directors. This is a policy board. But the state also defines the mayor as the CEO, which under any governance structure, the CEO is the chief executive that reports as accountable to the board of directors. But there's some competing authority there as well.
So, I was actually, thank you for expanding, and I was going to direct all these questions to you, you've already gotten in front of me, but we've led to a possibility of, is there something we could do now that we are discussing number 17 to help facilitate the mayor getting access to these?
No, it's done. It's done. It's just a technicality. They put the switch in. No, that's okay. We're all good.
You're working hard, and I will make sure you're allowed to.
The email was
Yeah. So that's all working.
So we don't have to vote on
We're just discussing.
because there's no need to do this. Is that the message? I mean, it's unnecessary.
So,
It'd be a vote of confidence or something in that.
no, the point is, that by the time this comes back to council again for another vote, I want us to be like knocking on the door of our new city managers.
But I like the retroactive pay, I want to bring that up again.
No, you don't.
And then, because, public comment today did reference me in particular, I just wanted to clarify that the only vote that I need to recuse myself from would be the appointment of the city manager. And I have not looked at the applications either.
You would not need to recuse yourself. There's no basis for you to recuse yourself. And it's kind of like one of my favorite episodes of The Office, if anyone's watched it. There's one episode where Michael Scott, this is file bankruptcy, declare bankruptcy. So he steps out into the office and he loudly and proudly declares, I declare bankruptcy. At which point someone says, that's not really how you do it. So let's just say you called yourself the city secretary, you called yourself the city attorney, you called yourself the city manager, you called yourself the city clerk, and you called yourself the chief cook and bottle washer. It means nothing until you make the appointment and then the council votes to confirm the appointment. The only point at which there could ever be any dual office holding is if each and every one of you were appointed to and confirmed to your respective positions by virtue of the process set forth in the local government code. And that's never.
So meaning though, so since I have applied, everybody knows now, I applied. When I applied, there was only one application. So it's changed, the field has changed. But when it comes down to the decision of appointment, if I was the person on the thing, would be the only time that I would not vote because I would stand to financially benefit. And then if appointed, I would be really pushing my seat on council, just to be clear.
To be clear, if in fact Mayor Brasco, in what could be his sole and absolute discretion, if he decided tomorrow morning to wake up and say, I want to appoint Deborah Hines to be the city manager, he could call a special meeting for that purpose, put it on the agenda and say, now go forth and vote. He could do that if he wanted to, or he could decide to have a more inclusive and community-oriented process. But under the local government code, the sole authority to make that appointment rests with
Subject to us voting.
Voted by.
subject to, it's like the Supreme Court confirmation. President makes the appointment, United States Senate confirms.
And you would abstain from that vote.
Oh, I haven't even looked at the application.
No, don't worry about it.
Well,
Um,
I'm being clean.
Can I ask did we have some sort of a FOIA request or something? How did the information get out that you?
All
or
right, well,
anyone-
now we're going to get.
Yeah, we need to. Okay.
Somebody's not there. Well, people know things.
Okay, we need to move on. We can't.
Oh, yeah.
discuss that.
We'll
We'll discuss that after we adjourn without.
I moved. to adjourn.
Second.
Done.
That concerns me. That is weird.
I mean, they come in and view them, because I mean, you can view them, right? I mean, if a
Well-
public, if a citizen asks to come in and view them, they would, right? I guess, no, because there's